Okay. Yuli, would you please read the governor's instructions on the current conditions under COVID on running meetings?
Absolutely. Just 1 second here.
That's okay. Nobody's in a rush.
Oh, good. Right here. All right. So thank you for joining us today. This is the East Bay Regional Park District's Board Legislative Committee meeting on Friday, June 18th. Pursuant to Governor Newsom's executive order number N2920, the Alameda County Health Officer's current shelter-in-place order effective March 31st, 2020, the East Bay Regional Park District headquarters will not be open to the public, and Board Legislative Committee and staff will be participating in the meetings via phone and video conferencing. Though that will probably be updated very soon.
Okay.
So, thank you for your patience.
Agreed.
Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. Where's sound?
Yes. Somebody check the audio, please.
It was like waves of sound.
Director
might
Waspy,
need
I
to
believe it's
mute.
feedback.
Yeah, we might need to mute. Okay. So first, we'll start with President D. Rosario.
Here.
Board Member Dennis Waspy. Here.
Here.
And our Board Legislative Committee Chair, Ann Wieskamp.
Here. You still have the weird sound.
We do.
It comes and goes.
Then next I'll list our members of staff that we have. Chief of Legislative and Government Affairs, Eric Feeler.
You expecting me to say present?
No, I guess it's fine.
Sure.
Management analyst, policy management analyst, Lisa Baldinger is here, and we'll just stay on that routine. We also have advocate Peter and advocate joining us today, and other members of.
Is anybody else having sound problems?
Yeah, Dennis, could you try to mute me?
Wow.
I'm doing this. That's better.
There we go.
Okay.
I know Director Waspy likes to speak during this meeting, so he might need to log off and log back in to fix that bad connection.
I think it would be good if he's allowed to speak. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely Dennis's. So I will log off and come back on.
Okay.
But I would like to make a. Can you hear me with this? Okay.
No.
I'll log off and log back on. Continue. No. Okay.
Yes, I was going to say, Dennis, if you want to mute yourself, you can also call in the phone number. That might provide a better connection. Don't see your face.
Okay, we have silenced Dennis for the moment. I'm sorry. So it was suggested that the board members might have some brief remarks about a day that's happening tomorrow. And let's start with President.
Yes, thank you. I think I would like to acknowledge that the federal recognition of Juneteenth, and also would like to acknowledge the Park District's role in partnership with Outdoor Afro to celebrate Juneteenth. The partnership is Outdoor Afro is seeking 50,000 people to go out into the local parks for 2.5 hours to contemplate what freedom means to each and every one of them, or you, and to get back to them with those reflections. And to that end, the Park District is on Saturday, Juneteenth, waiving all of our fees, entry fees to the park, so that everyone has the opportunity to go out and reflect in the park for 2.5 hours. So I think this is a great momentous occasion that we celebrate or commemorate this important time.
Thank you. Dennis? Is Dennis connected? On behalf of Dennis and myself, I'll simply say the whole board was very pleased to make this an official holiday. And I think it is wonderful that the parks will be open to everyone who wants to go in and help everyone celebrate Juneteenth. It started in Texas. Good news came and people believed you should celebrate it. And I think it's appropriate that throughout the country, we're all going to be celebrating it together. Just one more step of recognizing each other. The past is gone and things are better. So hopefully it will be cooler in the parks tomorrow, but go early and enjoy. Okay, thank you. Then let's go on with the agenda. What's first on the agenda? There it is in black and white. Okay. Eric?
Yeah, thank you. Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. And our first item on the agenda today is to review some findings that Lake Research Partners did on a survey in May. And we have their staff with us, David Merman and Jacqueline Jutin. And Lisa and I will share with a PowerPoint the findings, but then we'll have David and Jacqueline make some additional comments and answer any questions that the board may have. So with that, as you can see here, the survey was May 19th through 24th with an N of 500 voters. We were very specific about actually, people that were high propensity voters participating in the survey. Next slide, please. Again, very intentional about the geographic distribution and demographic distribution, but it mirrors the census tracts in terms of the percentages in the two different counties, as well as the different parts of the different counties. And then we asked if people were aware of the park district. That's okay. The next slide, please. We asked people if they're aware of the park district, and we had an 88% awareness, which will be interesting when we go to the next slide. Because now we have something like 92% actually using the park. So more people are using the park than are aware of the district. We think that's not all that surprising, given that often Joaquin Miller and Mount Diablo get confused as our parks as well. But good that they're being used. Next slide, please. So this is the question about willingness to pay. We specifically asked if they would pay $1 a month, and this is without any pros or cons being presented to them. And so we had a 72% yes district-wide, which even if you split the undecided lean yeses in half, you're still at about 68%. So definitely over the 2/3 threshold. Next slide, please. Oh, and I should have pointed out on the last the no strongly is very low. So that's a very good sign. Sorry, Yuli, next slide, please. Thank you. Then we asked about paying $3 a month. It's not as strong. 56% yes district wide, and the no strongly rises. So it would be a stretch. It would take a concerted education effort. But we did want to see what the willingness would be. And we'll come back to this willingness number a little later in the presentation after some pros and cons were presented to the participants in the survey. Next slide, please. Then we asked at $5 a month, and we weren't able to get above 50% on that. So I think at this time, without a real lot of education and maybe some additional research in terms of voters' interests, $5 is a stretch. Next slide. District-wide, anyway. And here we just wanted to point out longitudinally how we've done on surveys, and these are from two different firms. The first 2 to 3 numbers are from George Manross's surveys. The dip to 71 in 2020, we are accounting for that as a COVID-related response, just in terms of people not being sure about the economy and willingness to pay additional parcel taxes. But it is coming back up, and it's stayed above 70% for the last 3.5 years, which is very positive. Next slide, please. So here we get into the importance of investment, and as I think many of you would totally understand, protection against wildfire is the most important issue to the public, especially probably right now when it's so hot. Then wildlife conservation was second, which to me was a little bit of a surprise that that's popped back up. But 70% important is a pretty high number, so we need to pay attention to it. Urban creeks historically has been pretty positive for us. I think we've had designation for funding for urban creeks in most measures at 69%. That's an important. Getting some
weird feedback. This is a challenging meeting, I can tell. Okay, onward, Eric.
I don't think that's coming from me. I hope not. And then improving the health of lakes, so such as Lake Temescal, Jewel Lake, that has a real high resonance, 70%. And then we dip a little bit with the sea level rise and nature-based flood protection. Visitor use facilities such as restrooms and water bottle filling stations, that's traditionally always been fairly high. So that's a good message for us at 67%. And then increased service for underserved communities to improve park access. We needs to be explained a little better to move that number up, because I imagine that the real number would be potentially higher than that if we had explained it a little more thoroughly. And with that, I will send it over to Lisa to close us out.
Good afternoon, Lisa Baldinger, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst. And if we can go ahead and advance to the next slide, we did want to share with one slide back. I didn't realize you had already advanced. Thank you very much, Yuli. We wanted to share with our board the full scope of questions that we asked in terms of importance of investment. So Eric shared the 7 that sort of resonated the strongest, but we also did ask about supporting our environmental education programs. And I do really want to emphasize this is in terms of investing additional in new funding. It's not to say that these items are not important to our public. So supporting for environmental education programs, regional trail connectivity, repair and upgrades of historic parks, providing for increased park and trail staffing, multicultural community events, opening of new parklands, and increased community event support staffing, such as volunteer coordinators and naturalists, did not rise as high as the elements that Eric shared, but they did receive notes of importance from our public. The one that was surprising to us was the opening of new parklands, but if you put that through a new lens and think about the list Eric shared, new visitor use facilities did come up fairly high. So it really is a matter of framing and good communication to our public. Additionally, and our consultant David can speak more to this, he shared with us, Eric and I yesterday, a wonderful narrative around sort of how folks are feeling in a recovering from COVID environment, and a strong commitment to protecting what we have and preserving what we have. rather than taking on new items, issues, and sort of expanding and changing things. We're all sort of settling back into an open world. Next slide, please. So what we're showing on the screen is sort of the top line of each message, but we did flesh out about a paragraph on each of these topics. As you can see, wildfire protection and efforts to mitigate against wildfire far and away was the message that resonated most with the public that we interviewed. This was fairly well followed by climate and speaking to protecting our environment in a changing climate from drought, sea level rise, and other impacts. Messages that did well but were not bubbling to the top are public access and expanding park access, as well as funding to increase the numbers of staff. Next slide, please. As Eric shared, so we spoke to our positive messages. We also did share a negative message. And after kind of sharing those various perspectives on the increase in funding, we asked again willingness to pay $3 a month. As you can see, it was a 61% yes after kind of the what we might call sort of an education discussion on where the tax would be invested. This is a 5% increase from before we shared the positive and negative arguments. So overall positive. And next slide, please. And then lastly, in terms of time, we tested just a few of our partners in the region to see if these organizations and their support would give weight to a passing measure. We received the feedback that Save the Bay gave sort of the strongest amount of weight, but it's really our Regional Parks Foundation and partner who, should they support efforts by the Park District, it would resonate well with the public. We also, as you can see, had a question on the Sierra Club and the Audubon Society. Next slide, please. And so that concludes our PowerPoint presentation, and we can go ahead and pull down from the screen. And now I'd like to take a moment to see if David and Jacqueline have any additional comments to make.
Sure. So this is David Merman, partner at Lake Research Partners, and my associate Jacqueline Jutton is on as well. And together with our colleagues here at Lake Research Partners, we conducted this survey and also the previous survey that you saw from the time series measure of support. And this is, as noted, as a survey of likely voters, this is a sort of a hard-nosed look at who's actually likely to turn out in the 2022 election, and wanted to, clearly assess the prospects for passage of a specific revenue measure. So not just in principle, but very specifically, you're going to pay this much. Here's what it would bring to the Park District. How much support do you have? And you saw the numbers. I would note two things about sort of the current environment. And Lisa referenced this briefly, but as we emerge from the pandemic, people are, and this is across our opinion research that we do here in California and elsewhere, people are hopeful but somewhat shaken and nervous and anxious still about the future. And there tends to be, even though there is very clearly very broad support and very positive attitudes toward the East Bay Parks in this district, there is also just a sort of a feeling of uncertainty and a desire, as was noted, to sort of protect and strengthen what we have, but not necessarily expand. The idea that we would take on big new challenges when we have so many facing us already is a little bit, just the psychology of voters at this point seems to be more oriented toward protection. And you see that in these numbers, particularly that intense focus and interest in protection from wildfires, and the degree to which that rises above everything else, both as a priority for the district and in terms of the response to the messages, is quite striking here. And it's also consistent with the previous research that we did, which was more about sort of in principle, where do we need investment and how much do you support the parks? This is more specific. How much would you pay to as a taxpayer to support the parks? But it's the same priorities rising to the top in these numbers, and so that's fairly consistent. That is reassuring in terms of the accuracy of the research, but it also is a clear guidance, assuming that something goes forward, to focus on that that issue in terms of communication. So just noting those two things. And then I don't know, Jacqueline, if there was anything to add.
I think, yeah, you covered it, David. Thanks.
Thank you.
I would just add that you had some in the crosstabs, you had some a slide about persuadable voters, and from that my recollection was that the Latinx community was the most persuadable in terms of moving potentially from a no to a yes vote on a parcel tax.
Yes, and it was noticeable. And to be clear, there were some fairly what we would call normal patterns. If you look at local tax measures, you tend to get greater support from younger people than older people. You get greater support from Democrats than Republicans. Democrats vastly outnumber Republicans in the East Bay, so that's helpful. And you tend to have, to some degree, a greater support from renters than homeowners. And in this data, we found while there is support for a revenue measure across all communities regionally and also by race and other demographics, it is true that when you look at what we call the persuadable voters, which is the group that tends to be more undecided, plus those who tend to move in a yes direction. And Lisa noted that there was a shift toward a yes after people heard this additional information, that you do see Latino voters in this district who represent, about a fifth of the electorate, being a group that stands out as more in that persuadable audience, that they are a little bit more undecided, but also shifting in a positive direction as a result of information, which suggests that they would be an important target for communication in a campaign.
Okay. Anything else, Eric?
Well, just if folks have questions from the board, we're available to try to answer.
Dee or Dennis? I see Dennis's hand.
Can you hear Dennis talk?
I can hear Dennis talk. Yay.
Excellent. I apologize for everything. I'm on a telephone. So I guess a question I would have is I love these studies. Is there, when we do go on these giant district-wide measures, we always have a component where we, what's the better word than I want to use? Get input from the cities, generally by giving them a bunch of money. But, that united front of having mayors, city councils all back us. Is there a method to gauge that through a survey, or do we just hope that we can schmooze them into this, or have we gotten that far down the line? I guess that would be one question. The next question I would have is you mentioned that 1/5 of the electorate was Latinx. I'm wondering, is that 1/5 of the electorate, or what percentage of the voters, the real voters, is Latinx? And if that changes the amount of persuasion we think is worthy of concentrating on that section of the voters.
I can address the second question, the demographic question, if that's all right, and then turn to the staff for the political question. But it's yes, so it's actually 18% of the likely voters. So if you look at the census population of the East Bay, Latinx population is larger than that. It's more like a quarter of the closer between 25 and 30%, I think, of the census population. But we are working with the voter file of people we expect to vote and turn out in what's called, considered an off year, even though there's governor's race and everything else, but it's not a presidential year election. So you tend to have somewhat lower turnout, and we're reflecting that historic pattern in our model of who the likely voters are in the East Bay. And in doing so, the two groups that tend to have lower turnout rates in those elections are Asian American and Latinx voters. So we ended up with a sample that is reflective of what you typically see in a governor's year election, and it's 20% Asian and Pacific Islander, 18% Latino Hispanic, and 9% African American, 42% white, 2% Native American, and a few others and refused in there as well.
I'll go ahead and take on that first question. And Director Rossby, please make sure that I might have forgotten a few of the details, but in terms of looking at leveraging a potential revenue source in partnership with cities and counties, that is on staff's mind. One large difference between this potential revenue source and prior district-wide tax measures is that Measure AA was a bond measure for $225 million. Measure WW was a bond measure for $500 million. Should we advance a parcel tax at $1 a month district-wide, it is a significantly smaller total revenue that would be coming in. However, in Measure CC, which was also a parcel tax, we had a partnership with the Oakland Zoo as part of our full commitment list. And so staff is having bi-weekly discussions on advancing a revenue, a working group. And that's one of the items is thinking, how can we partners with city and counties? Is there a maybe potentially underserved or under-resources equitable grant program that we could create guidelines around in partnership with low park communities? Or additionally, ensuring that this funding, should it come in, is distributed across the entire district equally. So we are looking at kind of those various different factors. And if you have any input, we would value hearing it.
Thank you. That was great. And that was my kind of point, because we're not going to get as much money, so we can't offer this big largesse of money. So we're going to have to pick specific things that would pique the fancy of 33 different cities and the county. So I think it's going to be a little more difficult, but I think we're up to the challenge. But
absolutely.
Okay, Dee?
Thank you. This is a great survey and timely. They're all timely, actually. My question is there a way to survey, it's kind of segues from Dennis's question, is there a way to segue potential donors to a campaign? A district-wide campaign is expensive, and having headed up the Measure FF campaign, that was painful. Trying to raise that money.
I don't think Dee is offering to do that.
Well, I didn't hear that.
But he wants somebody who's interested and able. How's that?
Well, yeah. Is there a way to survey the willingness of potential donors to contribute to the campaign and to a campaign?
From a survey public opinion perspective, you could throw a question on asking if people would be willing to donate and give you some sense of the small sort of grassroots donors that might be available. I think but to actually raise, substantial funds for a campaign, you would probably want a true fundraising strategy that involved, larger donors as well. And that's not what we would do. That would be a different kind of consultant would help you with that.
Okay, thank you. And then my question too is, out of the 500 respondents, or especially in Alameda and Contra Costa, how many of those? Do you know how many of those were in the Measure FF zone?
We do, and I would need to look it up because I don't have that in front of me.
That is interesting.
Yes. We will have to come back to you with the specific number on that, but yes, we did have a variable there to track that as a subset of the district.
A comment on that might be of interest, President Rosario, is that David and Jacqueline shared with us, looking at the crosstabs, the support was more positive the closer you got to the Bay. So the Measure FF zone continues to be such strong supporters of investing additional revenue into district amenities, which is probably a tribute to the success of that program.
Yeah. I was just curious to see if there'd be one.
Yeah, that pattern was fairly clear, and I didn't want to misspeak on the exact line, but it's certainly true that on the Bay side of the hills, you see generally stronger support than on the Valley side, although it is still certainly at that $1 level, pretty solid on both sides.
Yeah, I was just curious if the Measure FF constituents were still willing to tax themselves again. So that, yeah, that's great. But
the data shows that they are.
Okay. Yeah, because I just wanted to make sure that we're not, it is equitable across the district, but, at Measure FF, so people are already contributing, but if they're willing to kick in another dollar, that'd be incredible. But a dollar only raises like, what, maybe $10 million? So, yeah, that's hardly anything with the projects we have in mind. So maybe
Yeah,
somewhere in
if I,
between.
well, just to throw out one other thought, I mean, we tested the $1, we also tested a $3 level, which is
Yes.
3 times as much. Didn't quite hit that 2/3 threshold. It does suggest, though, that possibly a $2
I
Yeah.
started to say,
level
two might
that
work.
might be, probably certainly somewhere in between. If it's closer to the higher number, then, that might be a plausible number, although we didn't test it, so I can't say for
Yeah.
sure.
So yeah,
And
I was just going to say the $2 sounds like a happy medium.
And President Rosario, one thing just to keep in mind, since we have not had a successful district-wide parcel tax, I think 2 attempts were tried, but this would be a foundation that would be laid for future additional asks or increases of the $1 potentially, and so it from a staffing standpoint, it does create some equity in terms of having a tax base district wide that we can build off of.
Yeah. And so was it tested to see how long the measure would last for?
We did not include a sunset date, I don't believe.
Yeah, and we have found in the past that in recent past that has not had that great an effect on level of support. The greater concern is how much will I pay now? How much is I'm going to pay next year? And I'll worry about 20 years from now. So that has tended to be less important, less of a necessary item to include in order to maintain support. But having said that, if you wanted to consider a sunset, that is something that could be tested separately.
Yeah. And another thing to consider, I was thinking particularly East County, if we pass the parcel tax, would we do away with the landscape and lighting district?
No.
No,
We
no,
are
no.
looking at this as an
Never do away
independent.
with anything. No.
So we would keep that.
It is not our intention for a district-wide parcel tax to disrupt any other revenue sources for the park district.
That's good. Thank you.
Well said.
Staff is well trained. Anything else?
I think that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Great survey. Appreciate.
It seems to me that we've been moving in a positive direction since I represent an area that's definitely East Alameda County, that things have been becoming more positive. And do we want to look at the opportunity to partner with, like, in my part of the area, LARPD? You might be able to gain, I don't know whether you could do it throughout the county or not, and maybe have a little more money in that and gain support. I don't know if that's worth thinking about or not.
I'll take a quick stab at that. We have thought about that. And I think much to Dennis's initial question, we are trying to think about how we can be inclusive of our neighbors and cities and other agencies. And as Dee indicated, 10 million a year is, you're starting to distribute it pretty thinly if you start building in other recipients. So that is an issue we've been thinking about, and we don't have a specific answer today, but we would by the time we would be moving anything forward if the board so chooses.
I just know that the combined effort we did on the trail through Sycamore Grove of LARPD and us working together to do that, you don't know how many people have thanked me for that. It was seen as a huge positive. So I think it's worth looking into. And frankly, I think the public is going to be cautious So I don't think we should try to ask for too much money coming up. I really don't. I think they're cautiously optimistic, but there's still a lot of people. It's not just people looking for work, it's also businesses looking for workers. I've just been talking to a number of people this week, and it's interesting. They're having difficulties doing certain things. And so it's a time that's sort of not well balanced, but it's getting better. So I think we need to be cautious. Maybe that's just my perception. Any other questions from anyone or comments? Dennis?
Well, yeah, what are the future steps? And I'm sorry if I missed it while I was fiddling around trying to get back on. But I mean, I saw, from what I gathered, we're kind of wavering. We're making it barely, like we always are, at $1. We're not getting there at $3. And I think Dee made a very good point. If we're going to do a district-wide some type of measure, we're really going to have to have all our ducks in order. It's not that much to where we can offer it to everybody, all the cities. I mean, so what are the next levels? I mean, personally, if it were me, I would suggest that it's our task now to get those numbers higher, however way we have to do that. And I don't know how we do that, but it's just our goodwill and our good service that we provide to our people, and let people know the good things we're doing. But I agree with Dee. I don't know who, and I'm not in this, thank God I'm not in this world, and I don't know who is, but if I'm donating money to a measure, if I'm going to put my own personal money into something, I'd sure like to know that we're right around the 70% level before I get into that game. I think those type of people don't like to lose just based on not liking to lose. So I think we really need to keep on asking the correct questions and providing the right service in anticipation of going forward with this.
Okay.
And I just like to add one thing to maybe look at is include another, like the Oakland Zoo, another regional partner might possibly be the Chabot Space and Science Center, and see how that polls. If that bumps the numbers up, or if there's another regional attraction in Contra Costa that would help draw voters. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Eric? What's the
No,
next step?
this is an informational item, so just wanted to make the presentation. I want to thank David and Jacqueline for their work on this. Very easy to work with, and very prompt in getting us the results. So thank you.
Yeah, I just like the detail in the crosstabs. It's really refreshing. Thank you.
There's a lot there, and happy to answer questions about any of those numbers specifically in writing if needed after this as well. But great to talk with all of you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your efforts, and it's certainly been well received by staff and the board. So thanks. More will come later, I'm sure. Okay, next item.
So we're moving on to state legislation. And our first bill is something that we had just had a conversation with the agencies about yesterday, which Lisa can speak to. But it came out of an action in 2018, 2019 on the budget that put funding into the Department of Conservation for regional fire protection designs and priorities. And so the state is looking at how do we allocate resources regionally, and in each region, how do we prioritize what activities need to occur. So with that, I think I'll send it over to Lisa to talk about the event, and then Doug can, the meeting we had yesterday, and then Doug can fill in the details that we may have missed.
Happy to. We had a very productive meeting yesterday with Kali'i Bright and Patrick Bright of the Department of Conservation. So the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program is funded through block grants in the Department of Conservation that are then administered through local regional entities. So the Park District applies to the State Coastal Conservancy for our regional forest and fire capacity programs. We were, as you can see in the staff report, successful with a 2020 grant application. In the discussion, Patrick and Kali'i shared with us the goal of this program is really to be the foundation of expanding opportunity for mitigation against wildfire. The program can be seed funding for creative thought at the beginning or end stages of the removal process. They were very open to discussing future grant applications around both having site projects that are educational to continue our vegetation management, but also biomass gasification units to rid ourselves of the end vegetation. And really, it was impressed upon us how this program is intended to be flexible and is really intentionally done that way for the benefit of a necessity that the entire state is feeling.
Okay. Any questions, comments? President Rosario?
Yeah, Lisa, you mentioned biomass. Was that for electrical generation to get back to the grid?
Well, the intention from the perspective of the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program would be to manage the vegetation that was removed from the site. But of course, you can tap a biomass gasification unit into a local grid to provide power. And the end result is the biochar, which is a nutrient-dense material, which could be provided back to the site of removal or to a local farm or a community group.
Yeah. In our conversation, Dee, the idea of having the biomass can be funded, and then the idea of potentially implementing that and proving that it's scalable, meaning that it could be a model for the state. That is the exact kind of thing that they're looking to spend money on in terms of the initial seed money. Anything that can be scaled up is a good candidate for funding.
Oh, that sounds like that there's a possibility that Brad Gallup's idea of portable biomass generators might have some legs.
Well, money would help us find out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brad had projected 2 sites, one Point Pinole and Anthony Chabot, and there was a company in Berkeley that I think that does that kind of stuff, and so I think there's a strong possibility. That sounds good.
If there was ever a time to try it out, it's now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's actually, real quick, there's a new technology, not so new, but something that's really becoming a buzzword, and that is actually converting some of the waste materials into a gas process that leads to hydrogen gases right now. So in fact, in the budget, I learned a couple of days back, there's $50 million to establish at least one facility in the Sierra, maybe 2. It'll be out for an RFP pretty quick to do just this, to be a collector of the slash of the materials out there, collect them in a spot, many locations, and possibly, use this process for hydrogen fuel.
Cool.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, the more the merrier. I think there's got to be a whole variety of things to do, because there's no one silver bullet for sure.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
There's a lot of wood out there. Okay, next.
And we'll turn to Doug for this one, but basically what it appears that it's a kind of a catch-all omnibus piece of legislation to focus on forest health. And one of the things that caught my eye, and I put it in the beginning on the memo, is that it's adding lightning to the factors for hazard severity zones. And that's obviously what we experienced last year. And then it also talks about Diablo winds specifically, which is specific to our area as well. So those 2 elements alone make it relevant to the park district. but then it adds additional resources for some of the other elements, including working on prescribed burns and making it easier for quote unquote burn bosses to get insurance. So it's a good bill, but when we raised it with Doug, I think, Doug, you thought there may be some other elements, basically, I think through the budget process that would address many of the items in this bill as well.
I think that's yet to be determined. I know that if you've been reading the summary right there, this is sprung from the Forest Resilience Action Plan, where it was a task force, 30, 40 people sat around and put together a list of actionable items around trying to that lead to better fire suppression and prevention activities in the state. And I think ultimately we're going to see through the budget some of the things addressed in this bill. It's again yet to be determined. The bill's been identified as an omnibus fire bill. I think I wouldn't describe it as such. I think there's a lot more activities outside of the context of what's in this bill. But back to Eric's point, yeah, it does have some positive provisions in it that might be a benefit to the district. I've, at the behest of Eric and Lisa, I've reached out to the author's office to see if there's any opportunity for additional provisions that specifically address our tree mortality issue. And again, I think that's going to be the product of continuing conversation going forward. Still early in the process.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may.
Dee?
I noticed that the issue around insurance for certified burn bosses is also, I guess DOT has two other bills further down we're going to discuss. So does this particular omnibus bill affect those two?
Yeah, excellent question, President Rosario. I couldn't tell you offhand. I'd have to take a look at the specific provision, the details of the provisions. If there is duplication overlap, generally those things are reconciled at some juncture, either just by a sit down between the two authors, or they'll have a conference committee on the bill. So it's difficult right now. I can't give you a specific answer, but at the end of the day, I think the legislature and the administration and everybody in the state knows what needs to be done around the issue of liability. And I think 332 is a little more challenging in that it creates some immunities, and it's my understanding the insurance companies aren't really crazy about that. Immunizing folks around there. If there's a fire that goes rogue, who pays for the costs? Again, I excellent question. Don't know duplication overlap, but again, I think everybody's working in concert to do the right thing to make sure that there's more prescribed burns out there.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Dennis, anything? If not, we'll move on.
Eric, you?
Yeah, sure. The next bill, SB 109, this is, I believe, more of a suppression effort in terms of finding equipment. But I think it probably is flexible enough that if we needed technology and equipment for vegetation management, that it could be applicable. We have a bit of a need for that with regard to tree mortality and the density of the eucalyptus plantations, particularly at Anthony Chabot, make it very difficult to get in and get them out. And so that's one of the reasons, according to Chief Tiley, that our costs are so high in this region in terms of removal. But at any rate, the bill is focused on developing new technologies to deal with our wildfire risks.
Okay. Question, comments?
Yeah, just a comment. It's just, this is really sorely needed because earlier in conversation, I noted that in the fires in Arizona, the fire service there, they're not being allowed to dip into the local reservoirs anymore because the water is so low. And if we have a couple more years of drought here, that could happen here. So I think developing new ways to fight fires is going to be highly needed. So
Is it in terms of dipping, is it because of lack of water, or is it the dangers associated with because the water is so low?
it's a lack of water. The reservoirs are so low that not being allowed to dip into them anymore.
Interesting.
Tough times.
Yeah.
Okay.
On SB 332, I believe we kind of touched on that already. The one thing that I might add, and I think Doug, you'll recall, is this issue came up we had a meeting with Senator Dodd and his, I believe, chief of staff, that this came up a few years ago, and it was something that our board asked us to look into prescribed burns, doing more prescribed burns. In fact, I think Director Rossby, it might have been your request initially. We initially had heard that the air quality permits were the major problem, and they are a challenge. But when we met with Senator Dodd, we learned about this issue of insurance and the burn bosses not being able to achieve it. So that was very informative, and I personally am pleased to see legislation moving forward to address that issue.
Yeah, me too.
So I guess Doug, unless there's anything more on that, or Lisa, we can just talk briefly about the last resolution here. It's basically recognizing all the work. It doesn't spell out East Bay Regional Park District staff, but it does talk about how park professionals, people who are working in the field really did perform beyond exceptionally. Sorry, stumbling for words here, but the recognition by the state that park professionals really were on the front lines is really important, and I'm really glad to see this legislation moving forward, and hoping that it will be meaningful to people out in the field.
Yeah.
Well said.
Positive.
Excellent.
Doesn't hurt just to be positive sometimes, right? Okay.
And it's next month, so we need to act on it soon.
Okay. Would you like a proposal to act on those bills?
Yes, we're recommending support for all 5, I believe.
Okay. Do I hear
So
I see President Rosario making the motion?
Oh, I think Director Waspy has a question.
Oh, Dennis?
Oh, mute, Dennis. Unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll second the motion. And my only question would be on SB 109. I kind of missed the deal there. So if we're going to do this testing, I'm wondering, and I know this is a question that only the fire department knows, but am I correct in assuming that we probably have one of the largest eucalyptus populations, plantations around in the state there? I mean, wouldn't we be kind of like, hey, we want to use you because you've got all the resource we need? Am I incorrect there? Are there bigger eucalyptus plantations around the state?
No, they call you Australia North.
Excellent. Well, then I hope we can take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That is a good segue to additional discussions that we've had about being a pilot area, but we'll save that to the next section.
All right, great.
I think he says, let's don't jump ahead on that. Okay, we've got a motion made and seconded. Let's call the roll.
President D. Rosario,
Aye.
Director Waspy,
Aye.
and Chair Director Ann Wieskamp.
Aye. Okay, thank you all. We're still alive in Sacramento and moving forward, we trust. Okay, Eric?
Well, I think on the first matter with regard to the budget and trailer bills, Doug will have the most up-to-date information. So I think I'd just let him give us a briefing on what he's been hearing lately.
Okay, and super hot Sacramento.
Yeah. Well, the good news about being super hot Sacramento is you probably know that we actually don't get a budget resolved until it, hits about 110. So
that's how it worked. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, the legislature adopted a budget, largely along party lines, obviously. I don't know if you saw the governor's reaction. It was very diplomatic, but I think he said that, the document they're sending along to me needs a little bit more work. I read in a Dan Walters column the other day, he said that, largely there is agreement across the board. However, there's only about 90% agreement, and 10% of disagreement represents about a $25 billion difference between the administration and the legislature. So I know they're busy continuing along the lines of negotiating on a number of topics. They have until the end of the month to have a balanced budget, and by the fiscal year. So I think I'm confident that something will come together by then. For the interest of the Park District, so just providing a little bit of background and a backdrop, we've really been spending a lot of time this year discussing climate bonds, discussing resources bonds, and we had a couple of vehicles moving forward in AB 1500 and SB 45 that had a lot of good positive content. And in May, when the revise came out and they revised the revenue estimates for the state and suggesting that we had somewhere between 50 to 75 billion in surplus revenues, the discussions around a bond or the state incurring new debt kind of fell flat. So since that time, there's been a real dramatic 180. They've pivoted. There's been a lot of conversation about taking the content from those bonds and applying one-time general fund revenues or even greenhouse gas reduction funds to try to address some of the priorities that were outlined in those two bonds. The Senate has put forward a package that largely reflects their Senate bond vehicle, SB 45. It includes good things like $100 million for the Bay Area program, $100 million for the Restoration Authority, additional funding around climate resiliency, fire resiliency, monies for those programs that we're currently applying for, like fire prevention, forest health, and for the RFFC, which is the Regional Forest Fire Capacity Program that we were discussing earlier. So I understand that the administration is generally amenable to these amounts of general fund expenditures toward climate and resource related matters. But I think the devil's in the detail, and part of the conversation first is they have to agree on how much are we going to spend, and then how is it going to be allocated. So you have three players. You have the Senate, you have the Assembly, and then you have the administration. They all have priorities, generally pretty consistent priorities, but they're nuanced nonetheless. So fingers crossed, and hopefully at the end of the day, there's general agreement on the budget around these new investments and expenditures in climate resiliency that would benefit the Park District. I'm feeling pretty good about it, but time will tell. And it may not be, frankly, for another month or 2 months before we have a finished product around or framework around how they're going to spend the money, the new money toward climate resiliency. So be patient.
Okay. I'm looking for patient faces with any questions or comments.
Oh, Eric, you want to chime in? There's some other things. I prepared a budget summary for Eric and company, and
Okay.
the Special Districts Association did really, really good work this year. Have to commend them. In the revise and the original budget, there wasn't much money flowing to special districts. In the revise, ultimately, they put $1 billion in there for arrearages, which are the amounts. It's just money that would go back to utility company or utility districts and water districts for lack of rate payer subsidy, or the money was getting back to the districts during COVID. So there's $1 billion that's going to be available to backfill those losses for those types of districts. There's money in there for transit districts, money in there for port districts, but there was nothing available for park and recreation open space districts. They worked hard, they fought hard, and at the end of the day, at least in the budgets that have moved forward, there's $100 million that will be available statewide for those other groupings of districts, including ourselves. And the language is a little wonky that's been prepared around how that money is going to be allocated, but we're certainly not excluded from competing for some of those monies, but there will be pretty heavy competition for those dollars. Eric, did you want to expand on that at all, or Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would expand on it in the sense that we were able to meet with the Department of Finance a month ago with, I believe it was Assemblymember Grayson's request, and they were very clear that the budget process was where the COVID funding would be decided. And so COVID funding for parks was something that we took away, that we needed to communicate to our legislators. And so we did organize a letter campaign where we reached out to our entire delegation and Department of Finance and the governor. And once we saw the language in the legislation, we just put together a second letter to the Department of Finance requesting funding for our agency. And we also mentioned and highlighted our sister agencies, so LARPD, HARD, Pleasant Hill, and Ambrose, who frankly have all incurred significant, Director Wieskamp pointed this out earlier, but significant cuts during COVID. So I'm optimistic that some amount of the 100 million that's in the budget will come our way, whether it's the full 10 million in terms of costs we've incurred and the 7 million that we lost in entrance fees and rentals of facilities and things like that. That's probably going to be too big of a number, the full 10 million, but I'm hopeful that we will get something for our efforts. And we have been working with CSDA, but also with CARPD. Thank you, Director Waspy, and obviously with Doug. I think we played a role in getting some of that money in the budget as well. Lisa, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Lisa?
No additions.
Okay.
And also on the budget, just wanted to point out quickly a couple of other items. The governor's May revise had an additional $125 million for local grants through the statewide park program. That's for park poor communities. The district has secured funding through that program in previous grant cycles, so we're excited about that. The legislative budget that is on its way to the governor's desk or is in transit or is in limbo added on top of the 125 million, another $250 million for local grants. But that is yet to be determined how those monies will be allocated. So positive news for local parks community, and important to you, Director, the whole board, is that in the budget on its way to the governor is funding to acquire the Tesla expansion site to Carnegie, $9 million. has been placed in the budget with some language that makes sure at the end of the day, if that money becomes available to backfill the losses to the OHV fund, that it go toward passive park type purposes, conservation purposes out there.
Okay, good.
That's great. That's huge.
Our public.
Our
works-
delegation did really good work on that front. Mr.
Good.
Glazier and then RBK worked hard.
Okay. Okay.
So on the tree mortality issue, it's really related to the budget, to the previous item. But the main update, I think, for the board is Doug, Lisa, and I, and our general manager met with Senator Wajkowski. I don't remember if it was yesterday or day before, but earlier this week, and impressed upon him the issue. He actually brought it up to us earlier in the year. So he's very keenly aware of the tree mortality situation. He appeared to be interested in trying to figure out a way that our need could be a emergency under the drought part of the budget, and that we could be considered a pilot program for climate related challenges in terms of wildfire, and was going to look into if that was, and Lisa and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but I had the impression he was going to look into seeing if that would be a possibility, perhaps to make that type of a designation. We also talked to him about the $3.5 million ask with regard to equipment that Assemblymember Bauer Kahan has requested. He seemed familiar with that and that it was on the list. And the final thing was the Conservation Corps and having a base of $3 million for infrastructure for the base at Holly Court at Las Trampas. It was one of the more attentive meetings where I've seen him really actually taking notes and being engaged. And it's important because he's the chair of the subcommittee that would have influence over these funds. So I think we felt positive, but I would like to also get Doug and Lisa's impressions of the discussions and where things may be going from here.
Okay.
Yeah, reflecting on the conversation, it was 2 days ago, and I had follow-up discussions with the senator that day. To Eric's point, yes, it was the most tentative. He was very focused, seemed very interested, understood the urgency associated with this issue, understood that we need long-term funding to continue to do field management work, but that this is an issue inside of an issue, as Eric and your fire chief down there have described. So talk to his chief of staff. I think it sounds like, they're gonna continue to try to do what they can. I think in terms of the alignment of influence, we're in a really good place between having Senator Wajkowski be chair of sub 2 and then Senator Skinner, who is chair of the budget. I think they're going to hopefully work in concert to come to some sort of resolution around funding. They're trying to avoid earmarking funds for specific projects as it relates to fire. I think there's a lot of creative people over in the building that could probably find ways to do that. But I was very satisfied with the conversation, and I hope it'll bear fruit for sure. Lisa?
One of the things on that, I agree with Doug that the idea of an earmark or something that's specific did seem like that was not likely, but a pilot of wildland urban interface tree mortality removal would limit, and if it needed to be tied to the Coastal Conservancy, would kind of limit the eligible applicants. So it would be something that we would be potentially looking toward.
Lisa?
No additional comments.
Okay. All right. Let's hope for the best.
All right, and on the next item, AB 959, which is authored by Mullen, is nuisance abatement legislation that the Park District is sponsoring in partnership with Mid-Peninsula Open Space. I believe at the last legislative committee, we shared with you all that Assistant District Counsel Jason Rosenberg testified before committee. And following that, on May 28th, the bill received a unanimous passage in the Assembly. It will be now advancing again to committee, and Assistant General Counsel Rachel Sater, who's here with us today, will be testifying on behalf of the district. We spoke with committee staff this past week, and all is looking fairly positive for the bill in terms of continuing to advance successfully. Doug, do you have any additional comments?
No, I mean, there's been a slight hiccup but I around the language itself, and I think we're finding a sweet spot relative to what we need to do and what the committee would like to see come out of the legislation. So I'm feeling confident.
That's good. Anything further on this?
No, I think just we're moving forward, and MidPenn's been a great partner, and Rachel and Jason have really been great. It's been a team effort with government affairs and legal, and it's a good team effort.
Good.
Agreed.
Congratulations on having that past committee.
Thank you, Doug, for all your efforts for us in warm Sacramento.
My pleasure indeed. Thank you.
It looks like Director Waspy has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank Doug and also acknowledge and thank our Government Affairs Committee, because that is very true. When we kind of got, for lack of a better word, stiffed as special districts in the budget, they jumped right into action. And, not only did you initiate everything, send out sample letters and get our fellow agencies like HARD and Livermore area and Pleasanton, also CARPED seems to follow our lead, and we're very comfortable and very happy with that relationship. But it's you guys' spark that gets them going, and I think that's a very effective tool. And I want to thank you guys for thinking of that and being so proactive and jumping on it right away.
Second that.
I think the whole board says yes. We'll speak on behalf of all of them. We appreciate your hard work. It's not easy. I appreciate their tenacity. They don't accept no easily.
No, they do not.
And I think that's pretty important when you're doing this good work for the district. So thank you, Doug, from all of us.
Then other matters would be the last point here. If not, then we can move on to federal.
Okay. Anything further? All right. Then on to the federal.
Okay. The first bill is basically cleaning up some language with regard to FEMA and one of their grant programs that allows communities to be reimbursed for catastrophic wildfire damages. It is primarily to give FEMA flexibility in terms of the 25% local match or a local cost share requirement. In many of their programs, they do have flexibility and leniency on requiring 25%. In this particular program, the fire management assistant grants, they don't have that flexibility. So this bill would enable them to extend some flexibility to communities that, frankly, probably not so much affecting the park district, but communities that would be smaller budgets, but could incur a large damage by a large amount of money in damages by a fire. And, the 25% match could be a big chunk of their budget. So this would give some flexibility in those situations, and we're recommending support. And I don't know, Peter, if there's anything else, or Lisa, if there's anything else to add.
Nothing down.
Okay. Any questions? Okay.
This was a bill that we've supported in the past. and it just specifies that playgrounds and parks are eligible for the Reducing Lead in Drinking Water Grant Program. This could be helpful in terms of the water bottle filling stations and other replacements of drinking water facilities at the park district. So staff is recommending a support.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, would this also go towards, because I believe we're auditing all of our drinking fountains for lead. Would this also help pay for those inspections as well?
Oh, inspections, I'm not sure. I think we'd have to, well, unless Peter, if you or Lisa know, we probably have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I was just going to jump in that process will be beneficial to the ultimate installation of upgraded amenities. So the inspections are still complementary to this legislation's intent.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Okay, one of my personal favorites, a bill to provide funding for monarch butterfly habitat. And it's a fairly large price tag, so I'll let Peter speak to the possibility of it in being enacted, but $12.5 million a year for 5 years for a grant program to establish more habitat. I believe that the park district would be eligible. The bill itself says local government agencies are eligible. That typically has been, even though we like to get the word special district or special park district in, local government usually covers us. It's just normally when they just say cities and counties that we become excluded. But Peter or Lisa, any additional thoughts on it?
No additional thoughts. This is, I only add that it came up during the Interior Department Appropriations hearing this week before the Secretary of the Interior. The Secretary of the Interior was very non-committal on it. That then triggered the chairman to ask the question again 2 more times to get a commitment from the department. They would continue to engage and be helpful in bringing all of their resources to bear on the issue. So it's a high priority for the sponsor, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be great because I think it would help. It would definitely boost give a huge boost to our efforts to create habitat as well.
And I believe we have, I believe Katie's on the line, but I believe we have a pending grant request at the state level as well. So we'll do what we can to help protect the monarchs.
I agree with you. That's a real positive one.
Hi, this is Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager. We don't have a pending application, but we do have a current grant with the Wildlife Conservation Board for work being done out at Point Pinole.
Oh, great.
Good.
Thank you. Then the next bill is environmental, as you can read, Environmental Justice for All. It's a bill we supported in years past. Actually, last year, it was sponsored by Senator Harris, who's now our vice president. So Tammy Duckworth from Illinois has taken up the legislation. It establishes as you can read, the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Grant Program. That is funding from offshore oil leases that would be in addition to the Land and Water Conservation Fund. As I think many of you have heard from Dave Wyman and others, that the amount of money from oil leases that goes into the account for Land and Water Conservation Fund is something like $2 billion a year or something. It's way more than we actually gets appropriated. So this would take some of that additional money and put it into a grant program for parks. It also establishes the Transit to Trails program, which is $10 million, trying to get people provide more access via public transit to trails. And then as indicated here also, it repeals the sunset provision of Every Kid Outdoors so that in perpetuity, 4th graders and their families could go to parks for free. So we're recommending a support on that. The bill also does other things with regard to air quality and other environmental justice issues, but these are the main points for that would be relevant to the park district.
Okay. Dee?
I have just a general question about the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Has that money started to roll out yet?
President Rosario, the money has started to roll out, but very, very slowly. The implementation is not gone as well as people had hoped. There has been a small release of funds, but not much yet. Part of it is the lack of leadership in the department in terms of political appointees being in position to get things moving. That has been a sticking point. Staff are afraid to make any decisions before somebody else arrives and wants to do something differently. So that's what we're dealing with at the moment.
And
So Director Waspy has a comment too.
Yes.
And it looks like, I'm sorry, I may have interrupted President Rosario. He may have.
no, that's okay. I forgot my question.
We will come back to you, President Rosario.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Am I on? Okay, so I guess I'll understand being slow and not being able to make decisions, but so am I correct in assuming that it was full funding and full appropriation? I mean, they're not saying we can't make any decisions and then use it for what they've been using it for years, which was everything but what it was intended for. Are there any protections, I guess is my question.
There are no protections. I mean, the agency can move as slow as they want and Congress can get as mad as they want. And at some point they'll meet in the middle and they'll work out this problem. I mean, the previous administration really gummed up the works. Yet that we're at 5 months now, we need to get moving. There's a lot of grants that need to be administered or decided on. They're getting there, but again, they don't have leadership in place. And so everyone's moving at a glacial pace. And so that's what I can share at the moment.
I guess if I may ask a follow-up. So if the number was 2 billion, I don't know if that's correct or not, but if that's the full funding and that's the revenue that you get from this land.
No, it's 900 million a year.
Okay, but if
2
it's
billion
900
may be the revenue that they get from offshore oil and gas, but
okay.
The federal government uses that money. I mean, it's used to balance our budget. This bill is a great bill. Don't get me wrong, but the Gulf states don't want anybody messing with that formula that they worked out in 2006. So it's a tough issue. It's a Gordian knot. It's not as if this revenue is sitting there and we can go grab it. OMB doesn't want to touch the money. The Gulf states don't want to touch the money. So that's what we're bumping up against. It's not like a bank, an ATM we can go grab money.
Okay.
Okay, well, soon the pace will increase. Hopefully. Okay, next.
So again, another piece of legislation that the district has supported in the past, the Break Free from Plastics Pollution Act. It would, as you can read, it would be basically a national bottle bill and moratorium on new plastic production. And it would limit the production of non-recyclable plastic items and then require a 25% recycling requirement for new products. So it's consistent with both what we've supported in the past, what we've supported at the state level, and also just in terms of keeping our parks clean and encouraging good behavior and also helping to address the overall environment. It's a good step. So we're recommending support. And Peter or Lisa, I don't know if either of you have anything in addition.
Anything in addition? Any questions? Okay, sounds good.
So this is one that I probably should defer to Peter on. There's a lot of bills regarding national service corps. And where that will end up, I think we're still monitoring, but there's been so much activity. I don't know if we have 2 or 3 bills in this space on this agenda that it feels like we will see some action. The climate core was specifically mentioned in the American Jobs Plan that President Biden announced with regard to $10 million to fund it. So perhaps that's the way things will head, but I think I should probably let Peter speak to the climate for overall core bills and maybe even including the second bill here by Senator Coons.
Okay.
So the development of this particular bill came out of last year and it is continuing again this year. It was really both bills are bipartisan in nature, but this was the first bill that was introduced last year because everyone saw what was happening with the economy and a need to build upon the success from the Land and Water Conservation Fund and keeping that coalition together. And this was a natural place to take all of the great work that was done and the stakeholder and support and continue that momentum. There's been a lot of conversations with senators and with representatives. There haven't been hearings yet on either of these bills. And that makes me nervous because we're getting to a point here on the infrastructure bill where hearings at a minimum need to happen in order to kind of move to that next phase in this legislative process. Again, in individual conversations with members and with staff, there's a lot of support for it, both concepts, both bills, but it's not manifesting itself and showing up in one-page summaries of these infrastructure proposals or being talked about enough by advocates for this in the House and Senate or by the administration. So it's kind of flying below the radar at the moment. But I think people realize that they need to be, at every level, need to be more public about it in order to make sure it gets in the infrastructure agreement. So I'll stop there.
Questions? Okay.
Senator Feinstein is a co-sponsor of this first bill, House 1057.
And the next bill, I think, is more related to COVID relief efforts, particularly for rural communities in terms of providing jobs, but also services in those communities that have incurred impacts due to COVID. And yeah, you can read it. It's coming up here now on assistance to educators, expanding food banks, and the like. So I think it's a good bill to support. We have supported it in the past. Whether it will be a vehicle that will advance given where we are with COVID, not sure. I think Peter indicated there haven't been hearings, so it's likely to be incorporated into some other measure, but still a bill we've supported in the past and we're recommending supporting again.
Anything else? Okay.
I have a question.
I see Dee has a question.
Yeah. Regarding the, is this strictly like an educational opportunity, or is it for projects that like what AmeriCorps has done in the past as far as field projects?
Well, it definitely would fund conservation related cores. So it's not, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's not just about sort of educational, it's about doing some of the work.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Dennis, anything?
No.
Okay.
Again, this is an element of what was in the Environmental Justice for All Act. It's in transit to trails, $10 million a year for those types of projects. This is one that Peter worked really hard on making sure that special purpose park district, including park districts, was included as being eligible. So this can obviously help with our active transportation network and making connections to transit and frankly, improving access to parks. E?
Yeah, I want to thank Peter for getting special district in the language. That was huge. Would this funding be available to take care of infrastructure of existing transit to trails projects? Like say the Iron Horse Trail. Would we be able to use some of this or apply for money to help maintain that trail?
I don't think it's intended for maintenance. Peter, do you know specifically?
I'm looking at the language as we talk here, and I'm not double checking it again. I don't believe it made eligible ongoing maintenance.
Too bad.
Hard to get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last bill here is one that we've supported in the past as well. You can tell that it's early in this congressional session when we've got all these bills we've supported in the past. But it would be a great program and it would be very helpful to the district. We've actually received some money from the EPA for some of our projects. In fact, we've mentioned Coyote Hills here, but it would codify. So the Region 9 sets aside some of their budget specifically for a bay restoration program. They don't have to do that. It's not in the law. So this bill would actually codify that program and I think increase the amount of money in it. I think historically that's been about 10 million that the EPA have set aside. This would increase it to 25 million. So it's a good bill and it's good thing for us to support.
Great.
Okay. Questions or comments? Would you like a motion?
Yes, please.
Who would like to make the motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made by, is it and seconded by Dennis. Can I have a roll call, Yuli?
Absolutely. President Rosario,
Aye.
Director Waspy,
Aye.
Chair Director Wieskamp,
Yes. Motion passes. What a surprise. Okay, next.
Our next
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Our next item on the agenda is our Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Federal Transportation Grants Program. Being that the application is planned to be submitted on July 8th, I'd like to take a little bit of time to speak to some of the benefits beyond just the grant package of going through this process of applying for a raise. So firstly, I'd really like to highlight the team who put together this package and share their names with the board. So Sean Dugan, Katie Hornback, Chantal Alatori, Lisa Gorgian, Brian Holt, Jeff Rasmussen, Yuli Padmore, Peter, Eric, and myself have all been actively contributing to a robust package of multiple trail projects across the district. Additionally, by going through this process, we were able to identify 21 strong trail projects that have independent utility across the district that can advance for future grant applications as they become available at the state and federal level, really looking through a safety, sustainability, and equity lens at this work. At this time, we are in the process of requesting letters of support from partner agencies and entities. And as a result, it's a great reminder to all of them about the Park District's 200 miles of active transportation across Alameda and Contra Costa County. In fact, I've, in the solicitation of the letters, received some responses kind of surprised that we do this work. And so it's really great to remind our partners about our great trails that we have in Alameda and Contra Costa. And then lastly, at this time, Government Affairs is putting together a brochure on the full 21 active transportation projects for advocacy use and education for our elected officials and partners to just continue the dialogue into the future. And so with that, I'll see if Peter or Katie or Eric have additional comments on the raise.
Okay,
I'm cracking up because Dennis, you're sideways.
Dennis just likes to show off.
No comments here.
No, I just echo what Lisa said about it. It's been a real team effort. And, it's a highly competitive program. We're submitting almost $25 million worth of investment. If you will recall on Tiger, I think we submitted something like almost 25 to 30 million and we received 10. So if we receive 10, that would be a huge success in my view. So we're plugging away. I do want to compliment Peter on we were able to secure a letter from our delegation signed by all of them, and that's not easy to do. So our congressional delegation is on the record of supporting. The next step now, of course, is to see if they'll make phone calls to the Department of Transportation. But that can happen after we submit the grant and we have a pending grant number. So just great work from everyone. And also really want to thank Katie's leadership in the pulling the team together every other week. So it's been a team effort, but every team needs a captain and Katie's been doing a great job of it.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you, Lisa. Yeah, it's this has been like probably my biggest project since being grants manager. So it's exciting to be a part of it. And yeah, I think at minimum we've laid really great groundwork for future grant applications. And Jeff and I are always saying grants are risky, so we'll fingers crossed and we'll see what happens with this one. But either way, yeah, we've done a lot of good work to then apply for future projects or future grants. So yeah, thank you to the whole team. It's been a good experience.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, and this is Doug again. I just wanted to commend everybody for going through this exercise. It's going to be a meaningful exercise in a lot of ways. Just in this budget alone, there's going to be, we think, $500 million. It's going to be applied for the active transportation program here in California. We're not certain how the money is going to be allocated. It might be used for projects that haven't been funded to this point over the last several cycles. However, there will be a lot of money that continues to flow through the ATP. In addition, we did make a budget request for money to go for recreation trails, which might be a good fit for some of these pieces as well. And that's yet to be determined if they're going to act on that. So good groundwork. It's gonna bear fruit for sure, team.
Okay. Thanks for everybody and quite a team effort.
Yeah, I just wanted to chip in and say that this was quite an accomplishment and it's on such a short timeline to get all these projects together and decide which ones and then finally put it into a package. So congratulations to everyone. And I appreciate all the hard work that went into this. And Peter, congratulations on getting that letter from our delegates. So good job.
Letters are easy. Phone calls are harder. That's what we're going to do next. So we're trying to get these members to make phone calls to the transportation secretary next. So that they've got the script. So we just hope that they step up to the plate. At least a few of them, just a few phone calls. Every bit helps.
Which is something, thanks for reminding Peter, which is something for you all as you're getting more out in the community and staying on Zooms. If you're interacting with any of our delegation, please mention this to them, that the call to Secretary Buttigieg would be important, supporting our application. So would be very helpful.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know if either Director Wieskamp or Director Waspy are going to, I think Representative Swalwell has well, he calls it Hike with Your Rep event on the Iron Horse Trail tomorrow. Tomorrow at 8:30 at the Dublin Pleasanton BART. They're going to walk along the Iron Horse Trail. So if you all are going, please put a reminder in his ear that we have this application pending, and a phone call to the secretary would be great.
Leave no stone unturned. There, you got ears. Okay. I was really impressed with how you pulled all of it together And the information is gathered together now and you can use it at other times. So that's big. It's not any of the effort was wasted. That's impressive.
Absolutely. We were very intentional about that.
I know you were very thoughtful and very thorough, and I think the whole board appreciates it. So thank you. Okay. If you see anybody from the delegation, have them lend their ear. Okay, we've got the message. Next.
The next item, I think I would just turn it over to Peter because his ears are on the ground closer to the actions on budget and infrastructure. But just, I do want to say, Peter's been great about keeping us informed at a staff level and monitoring and looking out for our interests and trying to get special districts inserted. So I just want to make a note of that because it's been a roller coaster, and I think Peter's just probably tired of writing on it, but he's still writing.
I'll try and give a high-level summary of where we are on all things infrastructure. You probably have seen many articles that talk about the state of play, where the White House is, where the House is, where the Senate is. The process remains fluid, and it's diverging views between progressives and moderates on what should be in. There's two pieces. There's what is called traditional infrastructure. You can imagine what that is, you know, transportation wise, maybe broadband, maybe drinking water infrastructure, and a few other things. Then there is talk about a second bill of things that many people believe are infrastructure, that this new administration believes is infrastructure, but can't make it into the first bill because the first bill is bipartisan. And there's a real drive to try and get as much done in a bipartisan fashion first, and then move to what is the second bill. In parliamentary terms, it's called a reconciliation bill because that only requires 50 votes. That first bill requires 60 votes. And so that's why there's been lots of coverage in the news about getting 10 Republicans to support a bill, transportation with some other infrastructure related pieces. Their latest proposal, the 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans have put together, is about $579 billion. That's quite a different proposal than the president's proposal of 2.2 trillion. So the president's plan is often referred to as the American Jobs Plan. He also has released something called the American Families Plan, which touches on healthcare and education and taxes and community college and paid leave. That's 1.9 trillion. So you hear about the president's plans, you hear about these terms tossed around like reconciliation. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I will stop there if people have questions about the general process, and I can get in a bit more detail where we are, where we stand on the bills as they currently are.
Questions?
Okay,
Well, good.
I'll just move along here. The Civilian Conservation Corps could find its home in one of these two bills. I continue to talk with offices and members directly. I hear positive things again about, oh, that absolutely has to be part of an infrastructure bill. But again, it's not, they need to have some hearings. And so I think there's going to be quite a bit of activity here in this next month. Question becomes, what do they do between now and the 4th of July? Because the speaker has set a goal of passing something by the 4th of July. That's a very short time frame. Is that just a transportation bill and then send it over to the Senate to put pressure on the Senate? Or do they dial back and work the month of July and pass something before August? The conventional wisdom is that at least some part of an infrastructure and transportation bill has to pass before August. There's just a short, they can come back and deal with it in the fall, but there's political momentum now, and now is the time to pass a bill. they also have to pass a budget. And so it's a lot of work to be done in the next 6 weeks, all being told. Just to summarize quickly, the House Transportation Committee passed a transportation bill on June 9th. In it, special districts are eligible for several programs: Active Connected Transportation Grant Program, Transportation Alternative Program, Community Climate Innovation Program. So that's really good, important work that I think will be helpful in the ultimate negotiations on this bill. So I think the House bill is better than the Senate bill. The Senate bill the House bill has $547 billion in funding. It's mostly focused on transportation. It has some climate and resilience pieces. So I like the House bill better than the Senate bill at the moment. And again, these are just strictly mostly on transportation. The Senate bill is $303 billion. It has some additional funding over 5 years, $500 million annually for bike and pedestrian trails, and special districts are eligible. It's a great thing. There is also a provision that Senator Padilla got in on vegetation management. And this is near transportation rights of way. In talking with the staff, they really believe that the Park District, the Park District is eligible, and they believe that many of the vegetation management issues could be eligible in this provision that they have. It's really, again, put under a subtitle of the bill called resiliency. So it's great work by Senator Padilla to get that in. It'll help in lots of places in the state, obviously. Where does all this go? I suspect that the White House is going to start to signal it wants obviously a higher amount than this bipartisan proposal, $579 billion. But there will be 2 bills. And for all the talk about certain Senate moderates not being on board with this proposal behind closed doors, and in my conversations with White House staff, they've gotten clear signals that Senate moderates will be accepting of a second bill that has other priorities in it, but it may not be exactly what the president proposed, and it may not be the same dollar amount. So there's progress being made, and special districts are on the table and in the mix. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can keep moving on. Just got a few other items. President Rosario, you got a question?
Yes. Is there anywhere in either the House or the Senate bills a way to claw back some of the tax breaks to help pay for some of these proposals?
A really good question. I can send you a 2-page summary of this latest proposal, but in it has 1 page just on the quote unquote pay fors, or how they would pay for that 579. Of course, in the 11 different items they list how to pay for their bill, taxes or clawing back some of those 2017 tax provisions is not on the table at the moment, because it's 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats, and they couldn't get agreement, so they left it on. It's not to say that it wouldn't come back on the table in a negotiation with the White House. People are really pleading for the White House to get more engaged. The challenge is that the committees have to do their own legislative work. So where the White House engages, they were missing the president while he was in Europe this week. Let's just put it that way. But now he's back, and the conversations are picking up again. So that's a good thing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I'll send you the 2-pager, and it'll give you some insights.
Thank you.
I think this is very similar to the COVID relief bill negotiations that I updated you about over a 9-month period.
Yeah.
This could carry into the fall, I'm afraid. I hope that they are able to move quickly, at least on the budget and a part of an infrastructure bill in July. But I'm worried that they're not moving at the pace they need to. So this could be a little bit long, drawn out negotiation like last year on the COVID relief bill. I'll touch on just a few other things in terms of presidential appointees and appointments. We've talked a lot about wildfires. The U.S. Forest Service chief is retiring in mid-August. One of the names being mentioned is Randy Moore, who's the regional forester just up the road in Vallejo. And so stay tuned. That announcement could be as soon as 2 weeks from now. Traditionally, it's been a career Forest Service person. He's been the Forest Service chief, but as Eric and Lisa and others can attest to, he was very responsive when we had met with him virtually, and his staff were quick to engage with the fire chief and others. So stay tuned. But that's a big shoes to fill. The Interior Department has only 2 Senate confirmed people at this present time, the secretary and now the deputy secretary as of yesterday. Some more appointments were made today. Some other people still need to be voted on in the Senate. And this goes to my point earlier. Policy doesn't move when you don't have decision makers. And they don't have enough decision makers in the building. Some things are moving, but big issues, weighty decisions, those get held until people are in their permanent seats. So a lot of anxiousness out there. Hopefully more people get confirmed. No one's being mentioned. Not a lot of names are being mentioned for Park Service Director yet. So I'll keep everyone informed. Again, the budget, real quickly, some good numbers on programs that are important to the Park District within National Park Service. 45 million for the Civilian Conservation Corps. In the Land and Water Conservation Fund, 420 million for stateside, 280 million for federal. So that is great to see those numbers, and now we just need to get on with implementing the program. 1 billion in there for what has traditionally been called BUILD, which is now called RAISE in the Department of Transportation. The Senate Budget Committee is hoping to take action on June 28th on a budget, and they're hoping to vote on the budget on July 12th. So that process will then kick off, quote unquote, a second infrastructure bill. So once the budget numbers are agreed upon, then those Senate committees can get to work and put together that second infrastructure bill that we were talking about earlier. I'll stop there and answer any questions you may have.
Okay, anyone? Dee, Dennis? Eric, do you have anything to add or?
No, just stay tuned. I think what I've heard is pretty much exactly what Peter said in terms of there's probably going to be a bifurcated process in terms of what's considered infrastructure and then what the administration works through on reconciliation side of the house. So stay tuned.
We are always an eager audience, right? Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, I think we probably covered other matters. The last portion would be before articles and board comments would be public comment, which we have not received any. So
Yuli, and I don't want to draw the meeting out, so I'm just going to say this, but just we did have a wildfire update on the agenda, but really Peter kind of covered it. I just want to acknowledge his work on it in meeting with senators, and also our meeting with the regional forester, Randy Moore, who was very gracious and generous with his time and immediately had his staff working with our staff, our fire staff, Patrick in particular. So they're moving forward and trying to figure out what's causing the mortality, and they're being helpful, providing technical assistance. So really great work there, and really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Anything further from board members? President Rosario.
No, I just wanted to thank Peter and Doug for their advocacy and all their work. It's especially on the federal side. Well, they're both state and federal. They're very hard to decipher sometimes, and I appreciate their ability to really summarize it for us and make it easy to follow. So thank you so much.
Okay. I see Director Wasby. Dennis?
Looks like you're on mute.
Okay, let me make this clear. I would move that we meet in person next month for obvious reasons. No,
You want to meet at your house?
Well, we could. I apologize for all these technical difficulties, and I would like to add, I cut myself out of the conversation. I'm very happy that the federal government has acknowledged Juneteenth, and I'm more happy that the Park District acknowledged it beforehand, and I look forward to celebrating that. I would like to say that, I really appreciate these studies. I like statistics. I like voter patterns. I think it's really very technically interesting. And I would propose that we would have the Lake Associates bring that study to the full board, because as we discussed yesterday at our closed session, having every board member informed of everything is really, really important. So I hope we can present this at a future board meeting. I guess, and also, I won't be able to make Eric Swalwell's walk with your representative tomorrow. I hope we can invite him to come to our deal. I thought we copyrighted that deal, that he can't do it out on his own. He's got to come through us. But I wish he had of. And then I would like to hope we can invite him to come out with us. I'm sure we'll do a better production and plan it a little better. Because I've got something else going. But anyway, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. I too have something else going, and I hope we can get him back to, I know we always like the parks. And so if we can get him to some place like Ardenwood, that is always popular and lots of people come out. And there's shade, and that is also a good thing when you're out there in the summertime walking. I'd like to thank our staff for all the detailed work they went through to get all of this pulled together for us, and to get all those projects ready, whether they're chosen or not. Sooner or later, we're going to use all of that data, and I really appreciate that. It was thoughtful, and I think you can feel like you didn't waste any time. And sometimes some things are frustrating. Dennis?
Yeah, one more thing, if I may. I was wondering, when we plan things, we do such a great example of planning things with our legislators and folks like that. I was wondering if there's any desire to maybe pre-plan, and I don't want to sound crazy here, but pre-plan what's going to occur after our first major wildfire in the regional parks this year. And I mean, specifically, I'm very confident that we will. I mean, I know we're going to have fires. We all acknowledge fires will occur in the parks. The best part about it is we will respond and we'll put the fire out, and we'll do a very good job of it. My question is, does it make sense to possibly set up something with a legislator or anybody involved with the process of getting funding and getting publicity out, that here's what happened, here's what we're going to do, invite press and say, hey, here's what happened, here's what we did, here's how we put the fire out, here's what we can use legislatively and funding wise to continue to do this good work. And I'm just kind of throwing it out there.
Sure.
With that,
well, you should also say that some of this passes, to be prepared to say thank you in that event if something happens. Thank the people who make it happen too. I like the idea. Be prepared.
Yeah, Dennis, that's a great point. And we should probably have a conversation also with public affairs and others. And I know Deborah Ocker's on the line with finance. I think typically what has happened is we apply for the emergency the emergency funding that becomes available either through Cal OES or FEMA, and that's a fairly direct process without much legislative engagement. But it's a good thought to think about, is there a way we could proactively, and it looks like Lisa has a point, but is there a way to proactively set up a almost like a response call from our delegation when things happen? So I'll let Lisa speak, but from my perspective, I would take that under advisement and really try to work on that.
Okay. I was just going to chime in and share our colleague Yuli Padmore is coordinating with a few elected offices at this time to set up site tours of the tree mortality as the vegetation work is underway to proactively share that on the ground experience with our elected offices.
Very good.
Great. And as per our conversations yesterday, I hope you include some key board members.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else to be brought before us? If not, I recommend wherever you are. Eric?
I was just going to say, just on that note, Director Waspy, I do believe we have somebody from resources coming to Anthony Chabot. I don't believe we have a date or a time, but when that occurs, we'll make sure that you are aware.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Eric? If not, wherever you are in this country, stay cool and join the celebration tomorrow. With that, I think I will declare the meeting over. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.